These are some of the best Irish books you should put on yourselves this year. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife and today I am taking you through some of the books that I cannot wait for this year that are written by Irish authors. Some of them will also be set in Ireland, some of them will be set a little bit further afield throughout the world, but they all have in common that they are all written by an Irish author. Some of these authors are going to be pretty familiar to you, whereas some of them are a little bit more familiar if you're already familiar with Irish culture, if you live in Ireland, but it's definitely a great opportunity to discover some of them. I'm going to list all of these books in publication order and chronological order, so some of them have actually already come out by the time that you're seeing this video. Some of them you might have to wait a little bit later into the year, but I promise you they're going to be totally worth it. Let's start with the first book that was published on the list, and that is The Letter Home by Rachel English. This was already published on the 3rd of February. Rachel is a broadcast journalist and she presents Morning Ireland, which is kind of like our topical broadcast radio show in the mornings. This book follows two women, one of whom is Irish and one of whom is American, and there's a kind of a connection between the two of them here. There's a lot also to do with the famine. One of the characters is discovering their kind of roots and how that is connected to the famine, whereas the other has come back to Ireland from living in the US and is helping her sister out with a kind of a genealogy project and discovering what their family's lives were like back in the time of the famine. I actually really enjoy books that are set in famine times. It's an area of Irish history that has always really appealed to me, and this is definitely a book that I'm excited to get reading. Next on the list, and also published on the 3rd of February, is The Gifts That Bind Us by Caroline O'Donoghue. This is the second book in the All Our Hidden Gifts series, and I absolutely cannot wait to get my hands on this one. I've actually got a NetGalley copy of it already waiting for me, and given how much I loved All Our Hidden Gifts, I am so excited to go back and visit Maeve and her friends again. This follows Maeve and three of her friends, Ro, Lily and Fiona. They all have kind of magical powers, and these have been discovered at the end of the first book, so now they're kind of honing their craft, but they're also discovering that now that their powers have been discovered by the world, they're starting to wane a little bit. So can they do something that's going to bring them back together? Something that I also love about this book is that we're going to discover more of Ro and Maeve's relationship, which started in the first book, and I am so excited to see how things are going to go for them. The series is also not going to stop at just this one, so if you've read All Our Hidden Gifts and you've also loved that one, and you've read The Gifts That Bind Us and fell in love with that one too, fear not, because there is much more coming here. Also released on the 3rd of February, and the last book on this list to have been released on the 3rd of February, is It Could Never Happen Here by Ethna Shortall. This book follows Beverly, and she knows that if your child isn't accepted to Glasslake Primary School, then you're basically a negligent mother. Beverly is absolutely desperate to hang on to her reputation as one of the area's best mothers, so she's willing to do absolutely anything and everything to get her children into this prestigious school. However, there is a scandal involving Beverly's 12-year-old daughter, and the news of this interrupts the school's performance on a kind of a national TV show, but Beverly is so focused on this and fixing this problem that's ahead of her that she's completely blinkered to everything else that's falling apart in her life. This is, I think, Ethna's 3rd book. I haven't read any of her other books yet, but the concept of this has intrigued me so much that I genuinely can't not pick this one up. A book that came out on February 14th is The Rebound by Catherine Walt. This book was among one of my most anticipated books for the year, and I'm really excited to see how Catherine's writing has developed from her debut book One Night Only, which I also read last year. This follows Abby, who has lost her job, has lost her apartment, and has lost her relationship back in New York. So she heads home to her hometown in Ireland. It's a really small rural place where everybody knows everything about everyone. She meets somebody on the way from the airport to her family home, and they offer to bring her back home, but it turns out that this guy is Luke, who grew up next door to Abby and has completely changed from who she remembers him as. As I've said, I'm really excited to see how Catherine's writing has developed, and I absolutely loved her first book, so I'm really interested to see if this one is also going to be up my street. A book that came out on February the 17th, and one of, if not my most anticipated books of 2022, Irish author or otherwise, is again Rachel by Marion Keyes. As you've seen this, I've actually just finished this book maybe 2 or 3 days ago, and I am still sitting with how much it has impacted me. I'm not going to give away a whole lot of spoilers. I'm not going to go into too much detail of what the book is about because I'm probably going to talk about it in another video coming up soon. This book follows Rachel, who you will know from Rachel's Holiday, which was released 25 years ago. Here we're catching up with Rachel 25 years later. She's no longer a drug addict. She's no longer living the destructive lifestyle that she was in Rachel's Holiday. She's actually completely clean living and now works as a therapist in the Cloisters, which is the rehab centre that she went to in Rachel's Holiday. However, a phone call involving somebody from her previous life back then is threatening to kind of throw everything into chaos all over again. This book deals with quite a lot of heavy topics. As you can imagine, drug abuse and drug use are among them, but there are quite a lot of other topics that are discussed here. I think they're discussed really, really well, but it is definitely a book to go into when you are ready for it. So far, this is my book of the year. Coming out on April 21st is The Snag List by Sophie White. I have already loved Sophie's contemporary series Unfiltered, and I absolutely know that she's going to play a blinder with this one. You're following 3 women in their 30s who are moving into a kind of a gated community in Ireland, and they're not exactly looking forward to the process of it. They feel like their lives are just going to be endless streams of Netflix and shouting children and life kind of taking a much slower pace than they're used to. However, there are a few kind of domestic dramas that are keeping life entertaining for them. One of them is trying for a baby, which is a little bit difficult when she's not actually sure that she ever wants to be pregnant. One of them is being overshadowed by her son's career, which is fine, except that her son is 11. The other one really seems to have it all. She has a great husband, she has a wonderful baby, but why is she still going through so much self-sabotage? As I've said, Sophie is a fantastic contemporary writer. I haven't read any of her poetry books yet, but I am so excited to see what this one is like. Coming out on May 12th is Idle by Louise O'Neill. Louise is an auto-buy author for me. She's one of my favourite authors, so when I heard about this one, I was directly onto NetGalley to get a copy of it. The book follows Samantha, who is an influencer with about 300,000 followers on Instagram. She celebrates this milestone by writing her memoir and going back to a lot of milestones that she's had in her life before this and describing what they were like for her. One of them is her kind of sexual awakening moment with a friend of hers, except that the friend, Lisa, who hasn't spoken to Samantha in such a long time, gets in touch with her and says that the events of what happened aren't really as Samantha portrayed it, and Lisa doesn't remember it as consensually as Samantha does. I absolutely love Louise's ability for social commentary in Ireland, and I know that this is going to be an absolutely amazing book. We're going all the way forward in September, and coming out on the 22nd is Forever Home by Graham Norton. I am very sure you recognise that name. Graham Norton is one of our finest exports and one of Chat Show's absolute kings. His weekly chat show is one of my highlights of my weekend. I've read 2 of Graham's other books before, and I have got a third on my TBR, but the concept of this one absolutely strikes out to me. You're following Carol, who has been a single mother for quite a long time, and her only son is grown and has moved out of the family home, but a second chance for love has struck up. But it's getting people talking about why this man is interested in Carol, what are the secrets that are connected to his ex-wife that he never really talks a lot about. But when this man falls ill, secrets are to come out and trust starts to fall, and Carol's own mother starts to take a deeper look into Declan's past because she is not having her daughter be treated like this. Both of the books that I have read of Graham's before have been absolutely phenomenal, so I have very high hopes for this one. The final book by an Irish author that I cannot wait for this year is right at the end of the year. It comes out on December the 13th, and it is A Million to One by Adiba Jagidar. She is one of our absolute best YA voices at the moment. I have read and loved the Henna Wars, and I have got Henny and Ishu's Guide to Not Dating on my radar for the Irish Readathon this month. 4 women on the Titanic are given the task of stealing one of the world's biggest diamonds. But there's going to be a whole lot of hijinks, falling out with each other, falling in love with each other, and a race for survival when inevitably the ship hits an iceberg. I am an absolute Titanic nut. I obsess over the boat. So any kind of a book that is set on the Titanic is going to be right up my street. But when I heard it was by Adiba Jagidar, I knew this was one I had to read. Those are just some of the books that I cannot wait for this year written by Irish authors. Are there any on my list that have taken your fancy? Or what book by an Irish author are you super excited for this year? Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.